I mean, all the best moments in campaigns are almost always player driven more than anything else.
The best and the worst moments.
Yes.
Let's add to that there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never our fault.
Welcome back, everyone. We are here on the We Hate Russell Crowe cast, and we are here to answer more questions.
Everyone except me hates him.
I like Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe,
I
if you
love
hear
Russell
this,
Crowe.
if you hear this, Russell Crowe, I love you.
This is just a cry for attention, Russell. We love you so much.
Someone here will have your babies, Russell.
I just want to retweet. That's all I want.
Okay, so we picked right back up from where we left off. So we'll move on to the next question then, before we go too far down the Russell Crowe rabbit hole.
Crowe hole?
The Crowe hole, yeah. So, what is a lesson that we can learn from media, either like general pieces of media or like just media as a concept or specific works of media that can improve our D&D games? So let's go with Denny first.
All right. Well, I think the concept of the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been very divisive in the years past. But I think one thing that seems to be overall positively received is the characterization of Thanos. And kind of drawing on the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think something we can draw from that to improve our games is the concept of fleshing out our villain. You know, what's their goal, their method, adding some complexity to them to make them a bit more appealing. Those are kind of my 3 points I bring from that is goal, method, complexity. Like they have something that they're trying to accomplish and they believe, or at least this is kind of how to make a compelling villain, they believe that it is the correct way, the righteous way, or it's the only way to get that thing accomplished. It's not evil for the sake of being evil. A complex villain likely doesn't see themselves as the villain, you know, or they might think that their goal is like it's something that needs to be done, and they're the only one that's willing to do it or has and truly understands the cost of needing to get that thing done. When it comes to method, we learn a bit about what resources our antagonist has at their disposal. You know, like, are we talking about a lone individual, or more likely, are they in cooperation with some sort of organization? What's that relationship like? Is it just mercenaries? You know, are they just paying people to kind of be in the way or to help them with their plan? Are they aware of what the antagonist's goal truly is? Would that completely change that relationship should they find out? And like, you know, is the antagonist well known? How is their presence felt in the setting? Are they wealthy, influential? Are they some sort of societal thing to overcome? Or is it more like a physical, like they're a strong, like if you went up against them, you would most likely die. And kind of understanding their strengths, their method, you know, do they have some sort of MO? Will our players go, another Infinity Stone was stolen, that's gotta be Thanos, or another guy was burned to death, that's our bad guy for this campaign. And then complexity, I think, is one that a lot of people have trouble with, you know. We look at the personality of a villain. What do they value? And the base game like talks about like ideal, and I think with my villains, above all else is where I tend to use ideals. I'm like, what do they value? Like if a villain admires beauty, perhaps it's only natural beauty, so therefore they're trying to wipe out cities and like built settlements and to find that natural beauty. Are they merciful? Perhaps they're a warlord on warpaths through villages killing like all the able-bodied men and women, but then they leave the elders and the children to rebuild even though they're the weakest of their society. So it's like finding opposites within the personality. You know, they might be a bad person, but finding the good in them. And I think that and it works for, our player characters too. They're usually good players, and they've got flaws. Kind of doing the opposite to our bad guys makes them interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, Marvel definitely, even just in the structural side of things, as you said, like the fact that it's like a shared universe can give you a lot of cool things you can do with an antagonist. Because I mean, foreshadowing's always good for your antagonist throughout a campaign. But I think I remember seeing at one point just the most almost excessive foreshadowing I've ever seen, where one guy, I think it was on like a Reddit post, was saying that, oh yeah, my DM's had like 6 campaigns we've played with him now, and he's still foreshadowing this big bad that we've never seen or fought, but they've had their hands in everything. And I'm like, wow, that is going to be quite the day when they finally, come together and stop that guy.
I would like to ask a question, William.
Yeah.
Did you ask this person their 6 campaigns? Did each one of those 6 campaigns last 6 sessions? Because if we're doing the maths, because if on average supposedly everybody's campaigns end after 6 sessions, that means that's only 36 sessions, which I mean for me that's not even a year worth of playing through a campaign. So it actually makes a lot more sense. So if their campaigns are like really, really short, makes sense. It's not a big deal.
Well, that's kind of a cool idea to do that kind of
out.
Marvel way. Yeah, you could do that kind of Marvel way of like you plan for a whole bunch of really short campaigns, and then the penultimate campaign is the one where the big bad gets dealt with, just like a Marvel movie kind of thing. That would be really cool.
Was he foreshadowing it, though, over the course of 6 campaigns, or did each campaign end prematurely before they ever got to fight him? Because that's how a lot of my past ones go. And that's why I continue to use some of the same stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So let's keep the questions moving. Oh no, you're right. I mean, campaigns never seem to end conclusively. Very rarely.
Right.
So
Ryan.
So I've thought about this a lot, and I've had so many answers, but I'm gonna try and keep it to one. So I'm going to refer you, if you will, to the Halo series. And you see, there is this little character in Halo 1. You might have heard of them. They're called Human Sergeant. And, they were kind of awesome in the game, but Bungie didn't really put that much work into their character, but they had a great personality. They shot off a bunch of one-liners. The whole player base was like, this character is the shit. We love this guy. I'm so sad that he died. And Bungie was like, well, what if he didn't die? And what if we gave him a name, Sergeant Johnson? And what if he has like a whole career? And what if we fleshed him out more? So if your players or your audience, with whatever piece of media that you're making, latch onto something, and there is a way to bring it back again, bring it back again. Now, of course, with Human Sergeant, he died. But, in D&D, not every NPC dies. Maybe they just meet them in a city, and maybe they're just a merchant, and they're hanging out, and the players go to a merchant to buy something, and the merchant's really cool, and maybe the merchant, if the players really, really like the merchant, can give them a quest and say, hey, help me out, I'll help you, we'll work in tandem, and blah, 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 blah. We'll have a beautiful, fruitful business/friendship. It'll be great. But yeah, basically, if your players latch onto something, bring it back, no matter how ridiculous it was, or just how off the cuff it was. Bring it back and flesh it out a bit more. Give your players more to look forward to with that little bit of thing.
Great advice. Yeah. I mean, all the best moments in campaigns are almost always player driven more than anything else. So when the players are driving in a certain direction, you kind of just gotta let them steer.
Absolutely.
The best and the worst moments. Let's add to that there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's never our fault.
I think when you begin to realize like the players want something, that's when DMing becomes really easy. It's like, I don't even have to write anymore. You goons are just like, we want this. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah. Okay. That is basically my DM style. It's just I have a bunch of prep, and the players are like, "We want to do this." I'm like, "Okay, is that
All
prep?
right,
No.
sure.
Oh boy."
The
Well,
key
that
is
goes.
treating it like Bungie did and not like Pixar did with Mater and Cars.
Yeah, treat it like Bungie, not like Paramount or 343. Capiche? All right, capiche.
All right, so let's move on to Alex.
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite topics ever. I love talking story. Actually, if I ever get around to editing it, I swear to God, one day I will finish editing it. I have a podcast with Crow's Perch where we basically rant for an hour and a half about story. And I think that's the biggest thing that people can take away from other media is all aspects of storytelling, build up, payoff, pacing, character. All this stuff is so important because, look at media. There's so many people who get paid a lot of money that don't understand how to make a story. Unfortunately, you know what I'm saying? And so, being able to look at this media critically and seeing why certain things work and certain things don't. One of my favorite things, I should say D&D stuff, but one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube are these different channels that just go into story and why certain stories work and don't work. I love the ones that compare, why Avengers worked and Justice League didn't, why this worked and this didn't, and just all different aspects. I love watching these writers YouTube channels just talking about that kind of stuff. I'm not writing a book. I'm too damn lazy, but I love watching these guys talk about the structure of a story and and how to keep, your villain from either going too much, having there's like a balance with villains, right? Because the new thing is to make them good guys that just had a bad day, and sometimes that kind of sucks is then you don't want to kill them. But then, just the mustache twirling, I'm evil and I kick kittens because Tuesday, that's no fun either. So, I think that's just the biggest thing is look at the stories that you like. Why do you like them? And really try to break that down. And again, like these YouTubers, Captain Midnight, Nerdstalgic, Filmento, even ones that you don't necessarily agree with. There's this guy, Critical Drinker. He's a Scottish dude. And he's really smart, and I don't agree with a lot of his opinions, but I like them because it challenges what I think and how I feel about story. And I've, like these channels and a bunch of other ones, it really makes me evaluate why I do things. Because a lot of times, you look for moments. You're like, okay, well, I liked this moment in this movie. And so you try to just recreate that moment, and it doesn't work because you didn't set up. It's not a good payoff. You didn't do this, that, or the other. So it's really, again, that's the biggest thing is story moments. You can have the same type of moment either be the highlight or just drop off and be boring as hell, depending on what you've done around that and with the characters and with so many factors. So, I could probably rant about this all day. I won't, but I think that's the biggest thing is just look at how story is and the stories that you like and the stories that work and why they work.
Yeah, I think you're totally onto it there. In many ways, one of the best things you can do to improve your homebrew setting or anything is just to pick up just any book of writing for anything, really, and just learn how stories work.
Twilight. Twilight.
Best cinematic film series of all time.
Yeah, no, exactly. I go on rants
Right up there
this
with
all the time.
Masters of the Universe.
On my channel, like a lot of these stories that are told, with the bad GM, that's one of the first things I say is like just look at stories, just read stories, watch stories, absorb stories, and not just the same one over and over, but really evaluate that. That's the best thing you could do as a prepping for a DM is to just consume media, but look at it differently. I say look at it instead of being like football analogy. Instead of looking at it like a player, look at it like a coach. Mm-hmm. You're not just like, oh, hey, that's cool. It's like, why?
Top down X's and O's rather
Exactly.
than just individual assignments.
Yeah, so we will continue on in the circle. So, Fred.
Okay. I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction. I'm still going to answer your question because that would be unfair not to answer your question. You tell me if I don't answer your question, because this does happen on these Dungeon Master Roundtables. Somebody asks a question and somebody goes off on this strange tangent, and I'm capable of doing that. First off, when you're noticing us in the screens, in the little boxes, Just because our head is looking down, it's because we're actually working, people, okay? We're taking notes, okay? We're not distracted. We actually are paying attention. And we're sending notes to each other and information to each other that you don't get to share. We know it, you don't. So we are working hard every moment, even when we don't look like we're working. My message is to Dungeons & Dragons designers, Wizards of the Coast in particular, but everybody who is designing stuff for Dungeons & Dragons, and that is, remakes aren't an instant winner or success, and they won't always make money. Strixhaven, Monsters of the Multiverse, good example. Don't keep remaking stuff because we don't like it and it doesn't work. What else is there? Oh, original ideas are actually better than stuff you've already done before. How much stuff has Wizards of the Coast redone? My gosh, I even saw redone stuff in Kobold Press's Tome of Beasts 2. I saw the Living Wall from Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. They just called it something else. I'm like, I'm surprised the Wizards of the Coast hasn't sort of decided to sue them and take them to court. But perhaps they changed enough of it, even though they pretty much ripped off that idea. So original ideas, actually, we do actually like original ideas. You don't have to remake all of the Magic the Gathering campaigns or worlds or so forth and stick them into Dungeons & Dragons. We'd be happy for you to do something completely new. It would shock us. Many of us might actually like it, surprisingly. We might even buy it. You might find more than 50% of the community might actually chunder up some money. And then I would have to say that money people, like, seriously, the suit people, the ones that control money, you guys are no good at story and being creative. Okay, get creative people to make creative stuff for Dungeons & Dragons, because seriously, you guys just think you know that you're creative, but you're not creative. You're just deluded. So get some real creative people to do the work and just give them the money to get the job done. Thank you. And stop paying them 10 cents per word for everything they make, and hiring everybody as freelancers so you can just rattle down the price. And then if you take money and you throw a lot of money at something, it doesn't mean it's going to work. Like, if you're going to make stuff for us, just because you throw lots of money at it, it doesn't mean it's going to work. Did I actually answer your question? I answered your question from a very sort of niche.
I think you did answer it. You just answered like how Wizards of the Coast can learn from media to improve our game, which does technically answer the question. That does improve our games.
Here's a recap of Fred Wheeler. Hey, Hasbro, fuck you.
Man, Fred, you're on a roll tonight, dude.
First Russell Crowe, now Hasbro. Damn.
Mate,
We're just taking everybody down. But actually, I mean, one of the things that I think you mentioned actually could be ported over into DM advice, because, as you said, like, being original and not repeating old ideas will almost always turn out better. I mean, I've noticed, I think most DMs have run the same piece of content more than once for different groups at some point. I am never as happy with it the second time. I always just feel so much lazier about it. I feel less inspired about how things are going. It doesn't feel like your brain's not coming up with stuff when you're running it the second time. That would be my experience with it anyway.
I haven't necessarily had that experience.
Really?
Yeah. So I've run Tyranny of Dragons for a few different groups. I've run it in Adventures League. God awful. I don't recommend ever being the DM at Adventures League ever. I'm sorry. Like, if you're thinking about it, don't do it. Just get a group and play at the game store, but don't do it under a program. I'm sorry. Just don't do it. But no, I ran it for them. I then have done stuff from that wasn't necessarily Tyranny of Dragons for other groups, like taking encounters out of it and kind of some of the story stuff. And then currently I'm running it through the campaign. However, in this version of it, we stream it, but I have taken, like, one of the players had kind of had a character that was going evil, so I just took his character away from him and made it a villain in my campaign. Now it's an NPC that I control. I had another player who dropped the game. His character has also become a villain. So there's side stuff that is becoming the primary thing. and I'm getting inspired by what my players do. It's kind of like what we said earlier. The best stuff and the worst stuff comes from your players. And so I've been able to take a lot because of the group. So, and when I've run other campaigns more than once or ideas more than once, it's the same thing. If I have a good group, I will be inspired and motivated and come up with all sorts of cool shit around it. If you're just trying to run it by the book, it's never going to be good the second, third, fourth. Like that is literally just going through the same stuff you did before, you know? Like the people that run Caves of Chaos over and over and over again, like I don't know how they do that without adding new story stuff or piggybacking off your players, but yeah.
And
I mean, to be fair, it's not just targeted at Wizards of the Coast. They're just the biggest bullseye, and they deserve it to be the biggest bullseye because they are the biggest.
I think you're right, Fred. Think about it. Yep. Like right now we have this huge thing in media where it's like, oh, let's redo Blade Runner. Let's redo this for the 10,000th time because it's safe. It has built-in fans, and they're afraid to take the risk on something that doesn't have a built-in fan base. Yep. You have to market like it's new, and then it might flop. Look at Top Gun, how that was doing in the movie theaters, right? Doing really well, right? From what I heard. But like, there are outliers that do really well that are brand new. Look at the video game Elden Ring. Nobody thought that was going to explode the way it did. It did. It was huge. Whereas other companies are making Skyrim Special Edition number 14. I don't know. Elden Ring, I think, is going to blow that out of the water if I had to guess, but I could be wrong.
Unfortunately, with D&D, it kind of makes sense because D&D's never had this kind of audience ever. And so
correct.
They could come up with a bunch of new stuff, or they could take stuff that most people haven't seen yet, and then, part of it's that, and then part of it's nostalgia. These guys that played like Fred, you have a YouTube channel, and if they said, hey, we're coming out with a Dark Suns thing, you're going to be all over that. You're going to be stoked, right? And so you get the nostalgia bait, not just you, a bunch of people. You get the nostalgia bait of like old school D&D guys who had these systems back in the day, and then you get to just rehash this stuff. It cuts down the dev time on it because you don't have to make a bunch of original stuff. You just have to adapt it for what it is, and a whole new audience gets to see it. Like what they should do is have those be like supplemental ones, like come out with a regular big book, original book, and then if they try to readapt this older stuff and not make that the big deal, just be like, hey, we brought this back, remember this?
Isn't the time to develop something brand new also a lot longer? And
that's what I'm saying. It's way longer to do that than just adapt something old. So it's they're like, hey, most people haven't seen this. Okay, here you go. It's new.
And we as DMs at smaller tables, we don't have to worry about that, the suit issue of like throwing money at something and hoping it succeeds, thankfully. The only thing we have to do is, if we're putting time into something that's original, don't be afraid to fail. Sometimes that shit will fail. And other times, it'll be pure genius, and your players will love you for it.
And you'll know if it sucks. You'll know real quick.
Yeah.
And that's when you figure out what the players did latch onto, and do a curveball, or just say, you know what, guys, this isn't working out. Let's start a new campaign.
Yeah. So there's salvage, and then there's restart.
Or let's try a whole new game system for this, or whatever you got to do to make it more fun for your group.
Yeah.
I think one of the biggest problems with remaking stuff, though, is that, when you try to go with the nostalgia factor, often what you remake based on, okay, we've got an older audience that will gravitate because they like the original, is they don't make it the way the original fan base liked, and so they have a rebellion against that. So they've now got to stand on the feet of the new people who never were encountering this thing. No, it doesn't matter whether it's Wizards of the Coast or Matthew Colville's MCDM or Kobold Press or any of those other publishers. Now now the product has to be good enough to stand on its own 2 feet with the new audience if you didn't make it the way the old audience wanted it. And for me, since I'm the old audience, I know this, okay? Hence why I do this sort of thing and hang out with younger people, since I am now obsolete in the YouTube platform, frankly. It's true. I've aged out. That's life. the thing is, it's like eating pizza. You know when you get the pizza and it comes and it's hot and it smells great and it tastes great and the cheese is there and the meat's there and like it's a great experience. And then if you don't eat all the pieces right and you put it back in the fridge and you come back to it the next day and you go to try to eat it and it's like, oh god, this is really horrible. I'll stick it in the microwave. That'll help. It's just not the same.
Microwave
It's
doesn't
just
help.
not the same.
Keep it out
It-
overnight, room temperature, and that's how you eat your pizza.
Especially
D&D
Frat
tips
house
from
style.
pizza.
I
What
don't
can
know.
our D&D games learn from pizza?
See, here's the thing, Fred. The problem is that they don't care if it's good because you bought the book. They don't need you to like the book. They don't need you to care about using the book later on. They just care that you bought that book once.
Yeah.
'Cause
there's-
that's all the value it is to them.
Well,
Because
yeah.
you're not gonna. It's not a subscription. You bought it. You're done. So that's all they need. They just need you to be interested in the front cover enough to buy it, and then it sits on your shelf forever.
They want you to
Unfortunately.
judge the book by its cover.
But if you continue to put out shit that people don't like past the front cover, they stop buying it. And that's why I have only gotten fizz bands in the last 2-3 years. I haven't bought another D&D product since.
Fizzbands was really good.
I just am not into a lot of the other stuff. Yeah, fizz bands is amazing. But
Although the Van Richten's guide was very good as well.
I did
I bought
not get that one. But I'm not into Ravenloft, so
That's
I could use that though. I've
it
thought about
has-
getting that one.
It has a lot of good stuff for just running horror in general. Like even if
The,
you're not doing Ravenloft,
The
it's got a
Spirits
lot of good
Bard is
concepts.
really cool. The Spirits Bard is really cool. It's RNG heavy, but it's really cool.
It's got my favorite stat block in 5e. Unstoppable Juggernaut.
Well, now I gotta buy it because it's got your favorite stat block in it.
Wow.
I'm sold.
My favorite stat block. You want to really scare your players? Send Jason Voorhees after him.
Nice.
Okay, so we seem to have hit a slight lull, so we can move on to Juice.
Oh, yeah. What was the question? Lessons we can learn from media?
Yeah, we've been on a tangent for so long.
Yeah. So, again, this is one of those things I had a lot of different ideas. People have kind of touched on a lot of it. So, some of the stuff that I like to take from media, I try and I want to be a better narrative style DM. I prefer those style of games. I can do dungeon crawls and whatever, but I don't need to play every second of my character's life. Like time lapses are great. I like to toy around with the idea of flashbacks a little bit in my campaigns, dream sequences, like all sorts of things like that I like to toy around with. But again, know your group. Your group might not be into that stuff the same way. So with that, though, you can take a lot of those ideas and how they do it from shows like, with flashbacks such as shows like Wheel of Time, or even looking at how to jump to different parts of the world and tell another story briefly and things like that. You can look at like Game of Thrones. Maybe you're running 2 different groups in the same world. You can take ideas from that. How does it impact other people in the world, not just your one group? Like, what are people doing in other parts of the world now that a dragon wiped out a city? Now you have to kind of think that. So you can take these types of ideas from media, adapt them into your games. Maybe your players don't know all that stuff, but you as the DM might want to think about these things. How is the world evolving based on the players' decisions and the consequences of their actions, or, failure of action? You're like, what happens if they don't heed the call to adventure over here and they go the other direction? How is that going to play out later on? So again, you can look at shows like that, The Dragon Prince, and all that good stuff. Again, just cherry pick ideas and that. Sorry, not as good of an answer because, again, you guys touched on the other stuff, but I can't really add to those.
No, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Or a great answer.
That's got quite some good value to it.
Yeah, because a lot of it is storytelling techniques, and a lot of those techniques can be pulled very easily across different mediums. And the idea of learning all the commonly used heavy lifters in other mediums and bringing them into D&D is very useful.
Well, and I think one of the biggest things, when I started DMing, I sucked so bad. And I had the same issue that I think a lot of DMs have. Once you introduce the big bad evil guy, he dies. Like, that's it. And so I was like, this isn't fun. I want a reoccurring villain. And I don't want to resurrect him every time. And I don't want to be like, oh, plot armor, he gets away. Like, So I started toying around with other ideas. And one of them, again, was, maybe giving them a dream sequence. Or what if they met this villain, didn't meet him, but give the players the scene where the players know the villain is doing something, but the characters don't necessarily. And you just let them know up front, hey, your characters don't know this, but I want to give you guys some insight into something. And, so for example, I had a god that was being resurrected, an old god, and all of the cultists were like getting a little graphic. They were donating their blood. How about that? To an altar. And I described how when this god took his form, he basically took their whole life, like all their skin, their blood, everything. And they were just skeletons left. And he was there. And so the players knew that what they were messing with was a pretty big deal with how I described it. It was no more than like 8 minutes of description, but it gave them an idea of what was happening. And that was kind of cool because I didn't have to worry about them killing him right then and there. I didn't have to worry about a stat block. I didn't have to worry about anything. It was just like, what would be kind of cool and get them going, oh shit. And so it worked. And,
Yeah, one of the best things you can do with any villain is make their presence known throughout. Like someone in the Discord, they wanted to use a green dragon as an enemy. They're asking how to make him effective as like the BBEG. I'm like, just make acid everywhere. Make leave evidence that the dragon was there somewhere. There's bits of acid here. There's bits of this here. There's this kind of destruction there. The best thing you can do is make sure that people know that your villain is there, whether they can physically see them or not, but make their presence known. That's always the best thing.
Half of an owl bear was left behind. It's almost picked clean, but where's the other half?
Absolutely.
Turns out they were picky and they liked the bear bits, but not the owl bits.
Mm-hmm.
We all like the bear bits.
Too many feathers.
Okay, Mr. Bear Bits. So I might as well throw my answer in here because I feel it's kind of related and the two conversations kind of flow together. So my answer is very much kind of structural as well with media, where the thing that I think that our D&D games can really learn a lot from is how genre works and how different genres work and how genres have genre expectations attached to them. And so, if you watch a Western, you're expecting a sundown gunfight. You know what I mean? So if you've got a good grasp on genre and how these things pace them, and you present your players stories that are in these genres, you already know what your players want out of them. You already know their expectations. Because if you give them a Western story and you say, hey, sun's getting kind of low and someone's being rude to you, well, you have not only, let them fill out one of the tropes, but you also avoided disappointing them, because one of the things with like role-playing games is we are stepping into roles, and tropes are in many ways roles. So if you give your players opportunities to fulfill genre conventions, they're going to be very happy. And a lot of the time you don't have to do anything. You just kind of give them the opportunity to live up to a trope, and they'll do it, and they'll be talking about how great it was for weeks. So you can just kind of leave those tidbits everywhere, and I like doing that.